got me today. You also got my wife Christine in the background. She's just enjoying this.
I got a stick.
She's got a stick and enjoying this toasty fire. So, as we were talking about earlier, there's a shipwreck, right? And so the Edmund Fitzgerald, one of the largest ships to ever sail, at least within Minnesota. It got the nickname the Mini Titanic, actually, from the entire sailing industry as far as cargo freighters go, because it was so big. But as we walk into this text, we're looking at Acts chapter 27, and 13 verse 27 is the text today. And there's three things I really want us to walk over this week. The impact of storms, being anchored during this storm, and in the midst of these storms, in the midst of these struggles, being anchored in Christ and having courage in this. So, reiterate that one more time. We want to go through impacts of storms. We want to be anchored during the storm. We want to be courageous during this. All right. So just to jump through the text a little bit, little context here again. Paul is going to Rome, and he's going on trial. And he's going to be put in front of the Roman governors and Roman authorities, and they're going to decide what to do with him. And so in this moment, we see earlier before this text, verse 10, Paul's actually predicting that as they're about to go through this challenge, this storm, that there's going to be some disruption. Verse 10, if you read, it says that, "Sirs," Paul said, "I believe there's trouble ahead if we go. Shipwreck, loss of cargo, injuries, and danger to our lives." Now, the shipwreck in this story obviously stands for physical shipwreck. The physical ship was put into peril. There was a major storm that happened. They were last at sea. They were cast. They actually anchored near land, but the typhoon type winds, it says, or hurricane type winds, pushed them back out into the Mediterranean Sea, where they were stranded there for 2 weeks because the wind and the storm were so strong. And even with them releasing cargo and trying to get rid of things so that they could be lighter and more maneuverable, they still couldn't fix their solution. And so I don't know about you guys, but in my own life and some of the people around me, I've seen struggles. I've had storms. There's moments in my own life, like I just mentioned financially, where I'm just not sure how my wife and I are going to make it. Or there's moments during school, whether that's getting teased or having rumors spread about me or different things like that, where I've just been very discouraged and I'm just not sure what to do. There's one point in time where my family was actually homeless. When I was in between 7th and 8th grade, we actually ended up having to leave our home and go into Brainerd, and there's a homeless shelter there, and they allowed us to stay at different churches through an 8-month period. And for me, it kind of seemed like an adventure, right? Because I'm a 7th grader, 8th grader. There's a little bit of, I'd even say naivety to it. I wasn't quite sure like the impact of the situation. But my mom, being a single mother of 3 kids, that's a storm. I mean, you talk about, disruption. You talk about the chaos in that. You don't know more, not even is there loss of job in that, but there's also your loss of security. You don't have a home to go back to. That's one of the things we take for granted is, I'm just going to go home and I'm going to have a place to sleep. Not everybody has that. And my family experienced that. Me and my 3 siblings and my mom had to experience that when we were in 7th, 8th grade. But the cool thing is that even in the midst of that, in 3 months, we were able to find a home. We were put on this waiting list that they said, it's going to be at least 6 to 8 months, if not longer. And in 3 months, we had a home. It's crazy. The morning I woke up in my new home, you guys, was my birthday. I mean, talk about God working in the midst of a crazy storm. And I'm sure you guys have storms too. I'm sure there's moments where people spreading rumors about you. Maybe you've got a major breakup with a girlfriend. Maybe you've got, major struggles going on at home, either between siblings or even in your family. And there's just strife and there's this chaos and you don't know what to do, right? But the cool thing is, in the middle of this, Paul is in the middle of a storm. He's giving these guys warning saying like, hey, this stuff is going to happen. And that's something that we don't always get. We don't always get a clear warning saying, hey, there's a storm coming. You should probably avoid it. Especially these ships back then, they didn't have radar. They didn't have navigation. They didn't have compasses. They literally followed the stars. They were navigating the oceans and the seas by the stars. And so during this storm, with the cloud coverage, they couldn't see the stars. They couldn't find out where they were going. Just major chaos, guys. Like they absolutely didn't know what to do. So Paul, in the middle of this chaos, in the middle of this moment of complete uncertainty, they haven't eaten, and what they say is multiple days. You know, we're told that they're out there for at least 2 weeks. So you can survive 2 weeks without eating. But I mean, that is like your minimum, right? And it's just nuts, guys, what these guys were experiencing. So in the middle of all this, Paul rallies the troops. He calls for a group meeting, right? Like, hey, boys, bring it in, guys, bring it in. And he goes, take courage. He says in verse 22, he says, take courage. He says, although we talked about this earlier, and although I gave you a warning that these things might happen, take courage, because the Lord has spoken to me, and he will not allow a single hair on any of our heads to perish. Wow. I mean, talk about something that seems super contradictory, right? Like, you're literally stranded at sea. You've got typhoon-type winds that are not letting up. You're having to ship all your cargo, all your valuables, all your goods, everything that you have that'll bring you any kind of security in that moment. You're throwing overboard just to hopefully have some ounce of control in this situation on this ship. And then this guy who's coming with you, who's going to see the Romans, and he's going to be potentially imprisoned again after he just served a 2-year sentence, comes up to you and says, take courage. Now, I want you guys to understand what courage means. The word courage, it means to act on one's belief despite danger and disappointment. That's crazy, guys. Paul says, take courage. Now, how can you really have courage in this moment? How can you genuinely take courage in the middle of disruption, in the middle of chaos? Well, at the very beginning of this, when they realized there were storms coming, what did they try and do? We're told in the text that they threw anchors towards the sea line there and near the coast so that they could be anchored to the shore in case something happened. But the storm was so strong it shoved them right back into the sea. So Hebrews 6:19 tells us that this confidence is like a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. It leads us through the curtain of heaven into God's inner sanctuary. Jesus has already gone in there for us. He has become our eternal high priest in the line of Melchizedek. So in this text, we find out that there is an anchor for our souls. It's not just this anchor that we have to somehow find on our body and throw out somewhere and hopefully we'll be fixed in this storm. But this anchor is not just for us emotionally. It's for our very soul, the deepest part of our body where all the decisions we make really funnel out of. In those moments where you're in deep distress, there's chaos, there's disruption, there's stress and anxiety. What's anchoring you? Are you led away? Are you led by this anxiety, this stress, this chaos? Is it just leading you to just be a mess? Or are you anchored truly in trust in God? Because you see, faithfulness and this word faith that we talk about quite a bit, it's got this true aspect of trust. It's not just simply a belief in my heart, but it's the fact that I trust and believe with my whole person, my whole body, that this is what it is. And so when we anchor ourselves in Christ, when we anchor ourselves through those storms, through those things that are super terrifying, we don't understand what's going on. Those people are picking on us. Those people are spreading gossip and crap about us at school or in our communities. We can anchor ourselves in Jesus Christ, knowing that when we are in Him and we are living our lives to glorify Him, that He is anchoring us in the middle of this. He is holding us grounded. And yeah, the thing with an anchor is that, it's not something that's going to be a perfect system. It's not the reality that once you're anchored to the ground, there's not going to be room for sway. The anchor has a chain, and that chain, there might be some slack there, and you might be pushed out. You might be pushed out and stressed. You might be stretched. God's not completely abandoning you in this moment, but there's going to be this stretch. But in that stretch, are you going to allow that tension to hold strong in Jesus? Or are you going to allow that chain to break, and are you going to be cast back into the Mediterranean Sea just like Paul was? Something to think about this week, guys.